Guten Tag, WAP. Guten Tag. Let's make history today as we go over Unit 4, Day 15. This is, of course, Mr. Linegar. But let's get started with our daily punishment. How do you make a good egg roll? You push it down a hill. Ha 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 ha. Today we're going to go over some of the big social and cultural changes, the demographic changes throughout the world. We're going to look really big picture today. Your key terms for today are the population bomb, the Green Revolution, Ecocide, the Kyoto Protocols, the Paris Agreements, Silent Springs, epidemic diseases, poverty diseases, and longevity diseases. Today, we are going to go over demographic changes in the world after World War II and environmental changes after World War II. Fun stuff! This right here shows armed conflict in the world from 1990 to present. If you look at this, where a lot of the armed conflict is, it's happening in Eastern European nations, in Asia and Africa, and Latin America. This shows death towards political violence. It's happening a lot in Africa, Asia, and South America, Latin America. Wars and atrocities. You see here for wars and atrocities. Some of the biggest places where we had wars and atrocities, Cambodia with Pol Pot. You have definitely Mao Zedong and parts of the Congo, parts of South America, South Africa. Wars and atrocities, 1975 to present. You see that with Rwanda genocide, bad stuff. Let's start off talking about the population bomb. There's going to be a huge increase in population after World War II. Here are some of the reasons the population bomb happens. There's going to be importation of new food crops from the Americas. There's going to be less localized war. There's going to be end of localized war. We have a lot of medical improvements that are happening during this time, which is going to cut into the mortality rates from tropical diseases. There'll be tons of medical inventions, which is going to decrease mortality rates. You have things like antibiotics, you have penicillin, you have anesthesia where people get knocked out before they have surgery, you have blood transfusions, you have heart transplants, artificial hearts. There are things like organ transplantations, organ transplants, antibiotics, chemotherapy. All those things will become more available after World War II. There really is a medical revolution during this time, and it's going to lead to less people dying because of medical reasons. Population surges will continue from independent nations throughout Asia and Africa. A lot of these areas are lacking industrialization, so these people there's a lot more people being born, and they don't necessarily have jobs. So it's going to actually cause these areas to get even poorer. One of the other reasons the demographic shift happens is resistance to birth control. The United Nations did provide birth control and in some of these areas for free, but in some areas they had traditional cultural values against birth control. Some areas were very angry at the Western nations because of decolonization, and they saw birth control as a Western plot. Population control has become a highly politicized issue. The UN agencies have aided countries with family planning programs. Countries like China have done a one-child policy that they had at one time, which caused the Chinese people to kill their daughters. However, a lot of these areas where the population has boomed, really Africa and Asia, they favor large families. You see this also in countries like India, and this has led to the population is increasing more than the jobs are, so it's actually increased poverty. This shows the population, a demographic map based on population. You see like the really big areas in the world. If you're just looking at population, India, China, they both have over 1 billion people. Parts of Africa, Latin America. United States and Europe are actually pretty small, Western Europe. Let's talk about the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution was a huge technological, agricultural improvement that happens after World War II. What's going to happen is they're going to mechanize the whole process of agriculture. There's going to be new seeds that are created that are genetically altered. You have the creation of fertilizers and pesticides such as DDT. Massive irrigation projects are going to be created around the world. what happened was after World War II, there was too many people and not enough food. Scientists predicted that between 1 to 2 billion people would die because of massive starvation. However, luckily during this time, this is when the Green Revolution happens, and they're going to create some agricultural products using things like new seeds, genetically modified organisms, GMOs, genetically modified food products, that are going to allow to be able to feed the people over the world. They're going to prevent massive starvation. The big person you should know for this is Norman Borlaug. He was a scientist and agriculturalist who created a new type of wheat product that could grow in even hot areas. It's going to be used a lot in India and Mexico. And really, Norman Borlaug is created and he's praised for saving between 1 to 2 billion people with this new type of wheat product. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for it. He's one of the only scientists I really admire. Famines today are very rare because of the Green Revolution. Rice, Vietnam, and US are big exporter. Grain and corn, America, Europe, Argentina, Canada, Australia. Beef, Argentina, US, Australia. However, there has been some negative effects to the environment because of the Green Revolution. One of the results of the Green Revolution was chemical pollutants in the soil and water. They did destroy a lot of forest to have more areas of land to grow crops. There's now fragile zones to increase food production. It's led to destruction of some of the soil, like some of the soil was used too much, so it's kind of like sucked up all the nutrients of some of the soil in some of these areas. In a lot of these countries, like in Mexico and India, it's big agro businesses that are growing all these crops. So a lot of like the single individual farmer, they've gone out of business. So there are some like definitely positive results. It prevented massive famine, but there's some negative economic and social results of the Green Revolution. Let's talk about carbon dioxide emission or gas emission. After World War II, there's going to be an increase in urbanization and more people are going to get cars. Cars leave carbon dioxide emission. This threatens the biodiversity. Gas emissions and coal burning contributes to global warming. Some countries are going to try to deal with global warming. In 1997, 159 countries meet to try to cut the carbon dioxide emissions. They meet in Japan. They sign the Kyoto Protocols. The American Senate actually refuses to sign this. In 2013, 2014, countries meet again and sign the Paris Agreement. This also tries to cut the carbon dioxide emission. Under President Obama, they did sign this. But then when President Trump became president, he pulled this out of the Paris Agreement. Under President Biden, we are back in the President Agreement and trying to honor cutting carbon dioxide emission to cut global warming. This has become a better and bigger issue now. There's more activism with gas emissions. You see people like Greta Thunberg, who's from Scandinavia. She started the whole like environmental movement for kids, where she refused to go to school and she's trying to like protest outside the Sweden parliament every day because she said that the old people are destroying the environment for the youth, and she's trying to bring attention to that movement. She's pretty famous. Let's talk about ecocide. Ecocide is the permanent and physical destruction of the environment. Ecocide is going to become a bigger issue and become more in the public conscience with a book in 1963 by the chemist Rachel Carson, Silent Spring. Silent Spring showed how the industry was destroying the environment, the biome, how it was like, pesticides were going into the river and destroying a local environment. This is going to give birth to the green movement or the environmental movement, same thing. You're going to start to see green parties arise in the 1980s in Europe and America and Latin America. These political parties focus on environmental concerns. They're usually pretty socially liberal as well. They also are strongly associated with consumer protection. Examples of consumer protection are like laws that make it how cars have to be made safely, how you have to have like wear seatbelts. Like before this time, seatbelts weren't mandatory to be put in cars. Speed limits. If you for drugs, like for companies that make pharmaceutical companies that make drugs, they actually have to be tested and approved by the government. Those are all examples of consumer laws. Those have become a much bigger deal. In America, the father of consumer protectionism is Ralph Nader. You're going to see more influence by environmental organizations like Greenpeace, World Wildlife Federation. Deforestation is still proceeding at an alarming rate. Rainforests are under attack. This is killing a lot of the species. A lot of these endangered species, or species are becoming endangered, and some of the endangered species are dying out. This is another map that shows population density in the world. A lot of these areas are happening in the big megacities, the big cities. Which are the areas that have urbanization, the megacities in the world? Which areas have the most poverty in the world? Demographic stress. Let's talk about women. Women have had an interesting time, mostly very problematic after World War II. Women were an integral part of the independence movement in a lot of parts of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. They often won rights as part of post-colonial constitutions. However, and often in a lot of these countries, these rights were often ignored. Women have rarely achieved economic or social equality in third world countries. Most political positions were reserved for males. Women who became presidents or won political roles often were connected to powerful men. So like in India, Indira Gandhi was the daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru. In Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto was the daughter of the President Bhutto. In the Philippines, Corazon Aquino was the former wife of the former president Benito Aquino. So they won positions because of their husbands. I mean, they were good in their own right, but that's how they got the position. Women in these countries and these nations often occupy a second-class position in third world nations. Social expectations in these developing nations are women marry early, have large families, few opportunities for education or a career, poor medical care, food shortages, lower life expectancies than men. Women are often more malnourished. Religious revivalism and fundamentalism have often limited legal rights of women. Like in parts of Saudi Arabia, it's still like hard for women to even be able to drive. Some Middle Eastern countries, women can't drive. In some countries that have had a fundamentalism revival, they've even done things like female genital mutilation, FGM, where they think all women are naturally sinful. So they abuse the women and cut off their clitoris. That way they can't enjoy having sex. That way they're not going to have sex before they're married and only with their husband. So there is like really, really bad things happening to women in some areas of these worlds. Let's talk about some of the changes in diseases, global health problems in the world. We talked before about a lot of the inventions and changes in medicine, which you should know and hopefully you wrote down. But there's also been some changes in what are the big diseases in the world. And I'm going to go over some of the different types of diseases, and you should know all of these. Epidemic diseases are diseases that have spread through viruses or bacteria. They spread at a large rate, and they've led to massive death. Some of the examples of these are the 1918 influenza outbreak, the Spanish flu, which killed like 50 million people, Ebola, HIV/AIDS, COVID, which I didn't include, but definitely COVID. There's diseases that are associated with poverty, malaria, tuberculosis, cholera. A lot of poverty diseases, there is actually a cure for them, but just because in some parts of the world they don't actually have access to the cure or not access for enough people, so they're still dying from them. And there's diseases that are associated with longevity. You get these diseases, you're more likely to get these diseases if you're older. Really, you see longevity diseases in first world nations, America, Western Europe, countries like that. Alzheimer's disease, dementia, heart disease, which is the biggest killer in America. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. Until next time, deuces, deuces, deuces.